Yeah, here we go. Here we go again.
Excellent. So we're here with the Subconscious Healers podcast. Healers is in more than one. So my wife and I are going to kind of discuss a really important topic today. It has many different names, but the most common name I use for it is going to be psychosomatic pain disorder. And again, eventually, this is something that is very few doctors know of. It is really uh, just starting to kind of trickle out in the literature. And it's a major contributing factor to people's ongoing chronic pain and chronic symptoms. So, what we're going to do today is kind of discuss some important ways to kind of rule out if what you have going on with yourself is actually psychosomatic pain disorder. Sounds like a long, scary name, mind body disorder. It sounds like something uh, you, rather scary, like what some of these diagnoses are. The good news is this one is not scary. It's just a way to understand if our brain has learned something that's not helpful. And believe it or not, this happens all of the time. Every time we learn something, our brain actually, through what's called neuroplasticity, wires brain cells together that we'll call neural pathways. And when these neural pathways get stronger and stronger, the more we think about something, the more we act it out, uh, and the more we put, especially when we put emotions with it, it really amplifies it. So this is a big problem whenever we learn something and that's not helpful. And believe it or not, this is very surprising to my clients, especially doctors and professionals, that when you look at something like chronic pain, it doesn't have to do with the pain circuits in the brain. It has to do with memory circuits in the brain. So believe it or not, chronic pain is something that's learned. So let's go through some topics today, give some examples of things that will give us an indicator of if this is something more serious going on that you should probably have, a professional help you with, like, uh, you know, a specialist, maybe, maybe somebody that really knows how to handle inflammation or something like that. Um, or if it's something that is perhaps misdiagnosed, which happens all of the time, and something that you could actually, through the right steps, you could actually, in the right knowledge and applying it, you could actually reverse it pretty simply.
Before we start that, we must be on the same frequency because we're wearing the same colors.
I see that. Yeah, we are. We got and it's funny, I just grabbed this without even thinking. So we must be.
So let's see. I can relate a lot of this to my own self. I years ago had lots of headaches and migraines, so many migraines within a week that really was like debilitating. It was interfering with my daily life. Um, couldn't really work well. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to sleep. Um, and really, I did chiropractic. I mean, I was like a full faith chiropractic person. I even went to chiropractic school. So that's how much dedication I was into that. We did acupuncture. Um, I changed my diet. I tried medicine. I did all of the things, and none of the migraines really worked. So at that point, you would say that this would be a psychosomatic pain issue because once I left the relationship that I was in, the migraines subsided.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, but being your spouse, I've heard this before and I know this, but when you say you tried chiropractic, did you just try chiropractic, like let's say a chiropractor down the street, just the average guy in a small town, or did you have somebody who really knew his stuff as far as chiropractic work with this migraine and tell us about that.
I had the best of the best cervical adjustments. Even Dr. Gibson, and we all in the chiropractic field should know Dr. Gibson. Uh,
So for anyone listening that's not in the chiropractic world,
mhm.
he's considered one of the premier, um, I want to say premier pioneers
Yeah,
of early
definite
research with
pioneer.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Hugo Gibson really knows his stuff in cervical for sure. And I would get a lot of relief from Dr. Gibson. And don't get me wrong, I love him. He's a great man. And he has the good heart. He has the intention to make you feel better. And I would feel better for a little while, but it would always return, especially during times of high stress during that situation.
So high stress in that situation. So you mentioned you were in a stressful relationship. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Just share briefly what exactly that means, because many of us have relationships right now that are stressful, right? With our
There
kids, with our
was,
bosses, things like that.
yeah, there was constant infidelity, constant, like so much so that the girls would be calling me to find out where he was. Um, there would be constant manipulation, lies, um, just tearing me down as a person. Just, the
And this is your former spouse,
yes,
correct? Okay.
yes, yes.
Okay. So for our listeners, if you're in a relationship or do you have any kind of people around you that are really treating you poorly, there's going to be repressed anger. There's going to be repressed anger. Uh, Many other emotions can definitely be there. But like I just said, when you are going through certain situations, your brain is constantly scanning data and wiring itself to adapt to that. And when there's a lot of emotions involved, anger, anxiety, worry, doubt, low self-worth, threat, whatever it may be, these amplify those brain responses. So it's safe to say that there's a term in neuroscience, what wires together fire, what fires together wires together. For every experience you have, whether it's snapping your fingers, writing your name, doing simple multiplication, 2 times 2 equals 4, your brain operates that way. It has circuits that are wired together, neurons that are wired together. And whenever you have a situation like this, those circuits are amplified in their wiring together. And so stressful relationships creating headaches in this situation, tension headaches, things like that, um, that are not fully responding, getting full relief, not getting a complete resolution of with other modalities, including chiropractic and acupuncture, is a really good sign that your brain has essentially learned something that um, is a is not favorable. It's learned how to keep symptoms on. It's learned how to stay um, in what I call a threat response. It's like a fire alarm that's constantly going on. And in this case, the migraines would be equivalent to fire alarms. And if you have a fire alarm going off incorrectly in front of you or around you, you know it, you can't ignore it. You
Mhm.
can't ignore a fire alarm when it's going off in the room next to you, and it's for good reason. It's because your brain is warning you of threat. So, what are some other conditions?
Well, I mean, even when you met me, high inflammation. Like I looked
Oh,
great on the outside. I looked like I mean, I worked out, I had the good diet, I looked really great, but the inflammation was so bad and the digestion just my
right.
gut was a mess, you know?
I remember rubbing your leg and you couldn't even stand it when I was just simply rubbing your thigh when we were watching TV, you
It
know?
was painful. I hurt all day long every day. There was not a day where I did not have pain.
And For our listeners, I want to really differentiate this because many of us are convinced that it's the body that causes the pain. So there's three things we have to look at. There is a sensory nerve in everything. Whenever you pick up a pin, when you pet a dog, when you go outside to get in your car on a hot summer day and you grab that door handle and it's hot, okay? Or if you touch something hot, if you're trying to see if your coffee is still hot and you're just kind of barely touching the cup, or if the stove is hot, you just kind of touch it like this gently. And what you're doing in all these circumstances is you're looking for sensory data. You touch and there's a stimulation that happens on your fingertips, and it even happens when a cold breeze blows in your face or you hear a noise, whatever it is. There's a sensory component where there's information from your skin, actually from all your five senses, what you can see, hear, smell, taste. And again, what I'm talking about right now is touching or feeling with your fingers or your skin. And that nerve, the first thing that happens is that brings information to your brain. That's the first thing that happens in every situation. Brings it to your brain. Your brain is the master of your entire nervous system. And it basically, the second thing is it interprets what's going on, whether it's a cold breeze, whether the coffee's still hot. When you go to pet your dog and you just go to pet your dog, maybe without looking, and your dog feels wet, and you're like, oh, okay, he's been outside running in the rain, or he's playing in that mud puddle out there again, whatever it is. You feel that wetness, and suddenly it's your brain that interprets it, not your hand, right? So the first thing is you touch something, it sends information to your brain. The second thing is your brain interprets it. And the third thing is your brain sends a signal back to that area of your body. And if there's a threat going on, in other words, something seems dangerous, something is has the ability to damage tissue, okay, or damage yourself, your brain will send a message to that to make you respond, to make you either yank your hand away or look at your dog because he's wet, or whatever else it might be, or cover up quickly because the sub-zero temperature breeze that hits you is really cold. Put your coat over your face, whatever it is. It's your brain that interprets that and then sends that information back. So the point is, it's your brain that creates symptoms, and your brain will create symptoms when there's a threat going on, but it can also send symptoms of a threat response when there actually is no danger going on. So because of your past situation, married for 10 years with your former spouse, having your brain wired in constant threat response, you actually left him, you moved to a different city. We met, we would sit down, watch TV, and getting to know each other. We're starting to date, and yet you still had ongoing symptoms, not because there was something wrong with your body, but because your brain had literally wired to keep that fire alarm active all the time. So even when we met, I remember you had migraines constantly.
Yeah.
Uh, and even
Yeah. And I
getting,
was searching for that answer. That's why I went to chiropractic school. I was searching for that answer to really fix yourself. And that's what healers do. They go into the field to try to fix themselves, you know? And I had chronic pain, digestion. I was tired all the time. Remember
right,
seeing me every day? How you doing? I'm tired.
right.
And it's
And,
not
and,
because I didn't sleep, because I did sleep.
and here's the thing, something else I want to point out, because you're right, healers do look for answers for themselves, because that's how you and I met. We were both looking for answers for ourselves. Yours was a brain wired in threat. Mine was a brain wired in threat too. Different symptoms,
Different
right? Different
ways.
people. Um, but for that chronic fatigue you had, let me ask you this, because I want you to respond to this. Was the answer fixing your mitochondria?
No,
Was the answer taking supplements to
I
to
took all the supplements. I researched the mitochondria. I did all the things for all of that, and it never changed.
yeah, we took the most super dense nutrients on planet Earth
Yeah.
for specifically giving mitochondria help, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And how'd that work? How was the fatigue?
You might have just a little bit of, perkiness, but it wasn't enough to really make a change. Does that make sense? Like it wasn't enough for me to say, this is the answer. It was never that.
Right. And some people might say, well, I have fatigue and my functional medicine doctor says it's all about mitochondria. And don't get me wrong, every case is different, okay?
Mhm.
But specifically, again, this goes back to the brain in a huge majority of cases. Why? Because like I said, the brain creates the sensation. It interprets the signal and creates the sensation. And for some people, they this may not make sense, but this is the actual truth. This is what literature supports. When a person gets the flu, when they have the flu and they feel achy, like viral symptoms, and they've got congestion, a headache, and a fever, the brain senses what's going on. And there's a lot of fascinating changes that happen. Your natural killer cells, basically your first line of defense, get supercharged and they start working far more effective when you have a fever. So your immune system basically it's supercharged, but your brain understands that there's something wrong and it itself flips on the fatigue switch. It turns on the fatigue, not the viruses. Wow, that's a big thing that people need to understand. The brain flips on the fatigue, not the mitochondrial dysfunction, not the toxins, not this, not that, at least in your case, and not in hundreds of cases that we've seen. Okay. The brain flips on the fatigue switch. Why? Because it knows the body needs to rest. So it'll flip on the fatigue switch. You rest, you go to sleep. And in a perfect world, your body, your immune system overcomes that. It deals with the viral microbes. It puts everything in check. It detoxes what it needs to do. Many times the viruses are simply exosomes where your body has to go through a detox phase. Okay. And once that's complete and normal functioning, uh, homeostatic inside of a normal homeostatic organism, the brain flips that fatigue switch off. But just like anything else, it can get learned incorrectly through neuroplastic connections, and that fatigue switch can actually stay switched on. And that was the case in your side of you. You didn't have a fever. You didn't have viral symptoms. Um, you were taking things to support ATP production, which is the fuel for cellular health. Um, and you were taking things for mitochondrial support, and you were still having fatigue. This is one of those cases to where it's psychosomatic pain disorder. It's not just a pain disorder, it's where the brain learned something incorrectly. And in this case, kept the fatigue switch um, activated.
You remember me even having severe allergies and like
Oh, yes.
having to have my inhaler everywhere we went.
And that was most of your life too, huh?
That was most of my life. I was pretty much in a bubble growing up. Like I had the allergy shots. I was on the allergy medicine. It was horrible.
Right. And many times, you know, we're going to be utilizing supplements and things like that, trying to get the gut under control. You know, avoiding certain things, avoiding certain foods, avoiding certain, I know people right now that are like, oh, I can't, I'm allergic to dogs,
Yeah.
some things like that. That's definitely not our
Yeah.
house.
I grew up I grew up thinking I was allergic to dogs, and now we have eight.
Right. And no allergies, right?
No allergies.
Right. So for people um, that may be listening to this, I'm going to say this. Allergies are a mind-body response. They're a psychosomatic learned thing. And why is that? Well, you can show somebody that's allergic to roses a plastic rose and they'll have an allergic reaction. They will have allergic reaction just to seeing it, just to observing that a rose-like shape is there. And why is that? Why would that cause symptoms? Because it's something called conditioned aversion. Your brain has learned something um, has learned to associate something, link something with a danger. So this happens all of the time. It's the case of most food allergies. You and I have done functional medicine. We'd have people come in with food allergies and this leaky gut, and we'd say, "Hey, every disease starts in the gut." And
Yep.
I still hear people saying that every disease starts in the gut, every disease starts in the gut, and they're doing all kinds of cleanses and liver detoxes and microbiome support and everything else. Um, and I'm not going to say in every single case, but most of these cases, a majority, and I mean in the high 90s, a majority of these cases are a brain stuck in threat response. It's the brain that's learned something. So conditioned aversion is, let's say you ate a poisonous berry. You're outside in the woods and you have a book and you're studying berries, and these two berries, one's really nutritious and one's rather poisonous, and they look so similar that you try it out and you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right, and you make a mistake. You actually eat the poisonous berry. You have a real strong tummy ache afterwards, intestinal disturbances for a couple days, and some aches and pains. Your brain that's taking in that sensory data and always learning and interpreting puts a danger signal to that berry. It identifies that berry as dangerous. And now just you looking at that berry in the future, a picture of it, or even having a smell of that berry brings up a nauseous sensation of, oh, get away from me. I want to avoid it. And it's to protect you. Okay. So in this case, the brain is scoring, hey, thank you. It's doing a good job keeping me safe from that poisonous berry so I don't make that mistake again. But the brain can make mistakes like any conversation. It's prone to making mistakes and linking things together incorrectly, especially in the high stress environment we live in today. So let's say you eat a nutritious strawberry and you have a stomach bug that's just brewing at the moment and you don't know of it. You don't know the stomach bug has not broke through yet, causing physical symptoms. But you eat a nutritious strawberry, an organic, beautiful, bright red strawberry, fresh from the farmer's market. You eat that, and your stomach bug at that same time just goes active. Your brain will incorrectly link the two, even if the stomach bug and the strawberry had nothing to do with each other. So when that occurs, um, now you're going to have a quote food allergy. Every time you come across that strawberry or the picture of it or see it, there's going to be a danger signal your brain gives you in some kind of symptom to avoid that thing, to avoid that strawberry at all costs because of the misinterpretation, linking it together incorrectly. And what happens, you and I have asked this question to many professionals. What happens when one person, your sister's one of these, right? What happens when a person has a food allergy and they're told to avoid it? Do they ever get better by avoiding that food allergy?
No, it just compiles to more.
It
More on more
compiles,
added to the list.
it compiles to more added to the list, where one food allergy becomes three, three becomes five, five becomes 10, 10 becomes 17, and it goes from one simple food allergy into multiple food allergies. And the final end of that is um, environmental chemical sensitivity, where everything sets you off, and you're used to you're so used to your brain reacting to everything incorrectly, to where now balloons and everything else is now seen as a threat by the brain. And many times these people live in houses where they have to use like masking tape, body masking tape, taping up doors and windows and things like that because they can't let anything outside in because of the allergic response that they're having. Again, psychosomatic pain disorder, a hallmark of that, okay, is the is we see that all the time. We help people reverse that actually very simply just by first understanding what's going on, and then simply because the brain is learning the most powerful way to reverse all cases of psychosomatic pain disorder is unlearning, turning the threat response off, getting that fire alarm shut off permanently. So let's talk about other conditions, allergies, migraines,
I mean, even skin conditions. We know, even a little girl that gets eczema during high stress. Uh,
right?
I know a lot of people that have eczema-like issues, especially when they're under high stress.
Yeah, did you know that um, during embryology in chiropractic college, we learned something about the skin and the nervous system. They originate from the same tissue called ectoderm. So
Mhm.
there's endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. And ectoderm is that at one point when we're an embryo, we're only made of those three tissues, and they all differentiate and become different things, our eyeballs, our spinal cord, different things like that. Well, ectoderm starts out as ectoderm, and then it differentiates as we develop in the womb into our nervous system and our skin. Our nervous system and our skin come from the same tissue as we're developing. So because of this, they have that underlying connection. You could call it entanglement, quantum entanglement for some of the um, more educated, nerdy listeners that understand what that is. Entanglement, that means they share characteristics because they originate from the same substance, right? So nervous system, skin. So a person that has chronic stress, their brain is in threat response. There's wiring and firing going on in their brain, keeping that fire alarm active long after the body should have naturally healed after 12 weeks from whatever it is. And that will produce um, a variety of symptoms, including skin conditions.
Even like tightness of their chest, just not being able to breathe deeply. If they've cleared themselves with getting the right lab test on making sure that their LPA is okay, and making sure the heart and everything is good, and that checks out, and they're still having an issue, it's more than likely psychosomatic.
Right. So you mentioned LPA, and then there's homocysteine, and there's fibrogen, and there's different clotting factors, CRP,
Mm-hmm.
inflammation. And of course, these are on the functional medicine spectrum, right? Um, they may check out, they may not. But let's talk about conventional for just a little bit. Your average conventional doctor, because a majority of people, I think, are still, if they have tightness in the chest, they're going to go to the emergency room. And
Mm-hmm.
emergency room doctors, bless their hearts, when you need them, they're great. When something happens, when you cut your finger off or something like that, when you get in a car wreck, they're the best place in the world to be is under the care of an Western emergency room physicians, right? But let's look at something else more chronic that's psychosomatic, that's learned, that has the brain has learned it over and over and over years of time, and it produces very real symptoms, and it's off the radar of these doctors. What happens is if you get chest tightness and you get it routinely and you're under high stress situations, and um, I will say this, conditioned aversion, which I described, past traumas, childhood trauma, particularly childhood trauma, um, big T, little t. What I mean by that is big T is life-threatening situations. Growing up with a parents that are, I had big T, you had little t. Okay.
Right.
Big T is growing up in life-threatening situations where you're actually getting hit, where you're seeing your mom and dad fight, divorces, loss of a parent, parent goes to prison, um, situations where you're inside of a house and a tornado destroys half of it, but you survive. That's big T. That's big T trauma. Then there's little t trauma. Little t trauma is more insidious because it's global. It affects everyone in our culture. Every single person is affected by this. And this is where your life wasn't under threat, but you had primal needs as a child, as an infant, as a newborn, and they weren't met. You weren't seen for who you're supposed to be. You weren't heard when you needed to be heard. You weren't held and touched during times when you felt overwhelmed. Perhaps you were alone. That's a real big one. Many times people say, I was never traumatized. I never had trauma. We sit with them. We regress the cause to find out what's the source of their idea, their anxiety, their diabetes, their um, chronic pain that won't go away, their low self-worth, and we find that they were a little child left in a room by themselves when it was thunderstorming out and they were alone. That's little T trauma. When good things were supposed to happen to them and did not happen. That's little T trauma. Like I said, it touches everyone, and it's not even on the radar of professionals. So conditioned aversion is one way the brain is under a threat response, keeping the alarm on. Childhood trauma, stressful life events and people, like what you were describing with your former spouse. Okay. Divorces, bankruptcies, a loss of a loved one, all these count, as well as past injuries. These are things that, past physical injuries. You got in a car accident, your brain has learned that there's some kind of life-threatening situation that gets wired and learned in there. Um, and then, of course, whenever somebody has symptoms that stick around, there's a mass of emotions, fear of being stuck like this forever, frustration because nothing's working. You're paying money, you're spending lots of money, thousands and thousands of dollars, and you feel like you're going to be like this forever. There's a frustration with yourself and with your doctors for not figuring it out. And a very interesting phenomena of trying to fix yourself, monitoring everything, whatever that is. You're scanning yourself, you're watching your blood pressure, you're doing the little aura ring. In our break and free group the other day, we had two people
Mhm.
say that they slept better and they feel better by stopping, by ditching, watching, and hovering over all their symptoms, trying to fix themselves. Yeah,
Yep.
when you're trying to fix yourself, you're sending a very clear message to that responsive brain that's always assigning meaning to things. Um, and of course, feeling stuck like this forever. Those things like that will keep that brain in threat response. And um, I'm sorry, could you repeat what started me talking about that?
Oh, chest tightness. We were talking
Chest
about
tightness. There
LPA,
we go.
LPA,
Right.
CPR. I'm sorry,
Chest tightness. Okay.
PRP.
So any of these things, right? So any of these things that I just mentioned can teach the brain to be in threat response. I was wanting to get back to chest tightness, right?
Mhm.
Well, you could have a number of symptoms from painful joints, shoulder, neck pain, back pain, irritable bowel, bladder incontinence, constant bladder problems, pelvic pain, joint, hip pain, neck pain, insomnia, arrhythmias of the heart, a number of things, ringing in the ears. All of these things indicate psychosomatic pain disorder, learned responses from the brain inappropriately, um, keeping symptoms alive when there's no threat active, but the brain thinks there is, right? Chest tightness falls into that category as well. So when a person has chest tightness because of any of those things I just mentioned, and they go into a conventional doctor, their approach is treat and street.
Mhm.
Treat you and streets you. So you're going to go into them and say, I have chest tightness. And they're going to hook you up to a monitor. They're going to look at you, look at your heart, take some blood work, look at very simple markers, troponin A, look for a
Which
heart.
is an important one.
It is an important. Troponin A is going to tell if the heart has actually been damaged or not.
Right.
And it could be a gallbladder attack, you know what I mean? It could
Mhm.
be a number of things, but they have chest tightness, and the doctors are going to look at you as a physical, mechanical flesh robot. And when they can't rule anything in, they're going to simply release you. They're going to put you back on the street
Yep.
without addressing any of those things that I just talked about. At most, you may hear somebody say, "Oh, you have a lot of stress," or "You're depressed. Here's some medication for that." But the traumas, the conditioned aversion, stressful life events, stressful spouses, and unhealthy relationships, past injuries, loss of a loved one, they don't even ask those kind of questions. Doctors of all sorts in functional medicine and alternative medicine and conventional medicine do everything they can, unfortunately, to avoid getting into the emotional, personal things of your life. They don't want to ask it.
Yeah.
They'd rather. let's see what you can do. Let's see what we can find, and we'll treat you with a medication or a supplement. But yeah, chest tightness, it falls into that category as a the brain actually learning to keep a threat response on. And of course, it's always good to get those things ruled out.
Hmm.
Okay, it's always good to be smart about these symptoms and get things ruled out. But chances are, if you go there and they treat you and treat you, I can almost promise you that there's your brain is in threat response, and that needs to be unlearned for
Yep.
for the symptoms to go away permanently and not just be masked.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I used to even have heart issues. Man, I was a walking psychosomatic pain disorder, wasn't I?
Well, we both were, and that's why we're here today, because you and I are on a very unique path of teaching people about the mind and body, and bringing people's awareness into these things, bringing the newest literature and effective ways of actually treating the actual cause behind it, which is a brain and threat response, which is a subconscious mind in distress. Um, Even after there's no threat active, doesn't really, the brain can miscommunicate, it can have misunderstandings, and it can keep the threat response active even if it's no longer, uh, even if there's no longer a physical threat going on.
Yeah, and even before you and I started really working on this level of work, even with all the nutrition that we were doing nothing but organic. We were very carb free. I mean, we were doing all the things. I was getting to the point where I was getting showing signs of ALS.
All right. And at this time we had one of the best, we had a mentor who was a legendary standard process practitioner back in the day. Um, a legend in standard process, which is, you know, nutritional whole food supplements from a farm in Wisconsin, and we were doing all the right things, but you were showing signs of ALS. And why is that?
So much stress that we weren't really aware of that needed to be addressed. I mean, we knew we were under stress, and I knew I had past things that needed to be resolved, but didn't know how, didn't know what direction to go. And once we did start figuring this out, all those symptoms that we just talked about went away.
Now, what was your early sign of ALS? And here's the
I
thing, if I'm
was
not,
dropping
if
things.
right, dropping things. If I'm not mistaken, too, you have a family member, uh, very close to you, very young, unvaccinated, um, homeschooled, grew up on eating, ranch beef, like from a grass-fed ranch, who is also showing early signs of ALS, right?
Yeah,
And so
dropping
AL,
things, feeling so weak,
yep,
not being able to really.
states of paralysis.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's the thing too, what we want to point out. Have any doctors offered them any kind of answers or solutions to what's going on?
No.
Right. And it's unfortunate because what we're talking about is that uncomfortable emotional thing that doctors don't want to go to. And many times people, even if it's sometimes parents, don't want to face because they don't want to, uh, they don't want to admit or declare or take the responsibility that perhaps something they're doing is wrong. So they will look for an outside intervention. And we've all done that. We've all been there. My family's the same way. Um, and we've been conditioned to believe that if it's something going on, it's something wrong with my body, not perhaps what I'm creating in my thoughts, my perceptions, my emotions, everything else. So yeah, dropping things. And ALS has a since you brought that up, amylolateral trophic amylolateral trophic sclerosis, or otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Um, it is, there's a very clear personality responsible for that. It's a personality that the person cannot accept their self-worth for who they really are. They cannot, uh, they feel like they have to do to feel value. They have to do things. They have to work. They have to identify with a role of doing something in order to generate value. Just they won't have value for who they are as a person. That's a real clear sign of somebody that has ALS. Lou Gehrig's biography, very, very clear example of that. Another book called Tuesdays with Maury points out where this teacher started to develop ALS, and he had one of his students meet with him on Tuesdays, and the teacher is Maury, the the student writing the book, his name is Mitch. They're meeting on Tuesdays, and in one part of that book, I had a patient point this out to me. She goes, "Man, Gabe, you pointed out that one spot. I read that book many times, but man, where you pointed out, you interpreted, you saw something I didn't see." And that was the fact that Maury told Mitch, the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm having you write this book is to prove that even dying people with ALS still have a value. So they're um they've identified with a role that their only value comes from doing, 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 and not accepting value for who they are. Now that right there is a little deeper than psychosomatic pain disorder, but it's still something that's learned. It's a coping mechanism, and there are a lot of repressed emotions with that, a lot of repressed emotions. And when you repress emotions over time, uh, the energy builds up and builds up and builds up, and their symptoms start to happen. In this case, happening with the nervous system. And Candace Pert's work kind of completely proves that when you don't express things, they build up and unmetabolized neuropeptides in the body, and they will actually accumulate in areas of the body that, in a predictable way, they will accumulate in areas that have to do with those kind of personalities themselves. And psychosomatic, well, that's that term. Actually, it's called psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology. Basically, everything about your entire immune system, nervous system, hormonal apparatus are all connected. They're a part of the same system that regulates your emotions. So everything we're talking about, completely legit. Um, it's just one of those things that people need to be more aware of for certain.
Yeah, if they're not able to find answers, this is something that they should probably look into for sure.
E- exactly.
Because it could be the answer that they're really looking for. Um, if they're not going to avoid it, you know.
Right. Uh, Transformation involves the truth.
Hmm.
Transformation, you cannot have transformation without observing the truth. So
Right.
if you're running from the truth, don't count on anything providing a long-term, uh, you know, the long-term solution you may be seeking.
Yeah. I would also plug in here that in October we're going to be holding an in-person event where we're going to dive deep into the psychosomatic pain disorder issues. And there's going to be transformation.
Right. That's a good point. And this is going to be for every person, for every kind of person, not just professionals,
Yeah.
but people that really need answers, that have chronic symptoms, chronic pain, and they're wanting to really get down to it. Because at this event, I'm going to basically be unloading every tool I have for people to have the transformation they want. So if you have somebody in the audience that has chronic pain, if you know somebody that's desperately looking for answers for their chronic symptoms, their gut, their headaches, their tension, their back pain, um, IBS, gout, whatever it may be, um, this is not going to be something that they'll want to miss. This will be something very relevant to them. And we always have transformation in our events. In our break-in free group, a woman had neuropathy, severe neuropathy in her foot from 2006. I got news for you. When you have neuropathy from 2006 in your foot, you don't have neuropathy because that nerve has healed. The body only knows how to heal. It was a threat response in her brain. Remember, I talked about the three systems? Your brain senses something, it interprets it, number two, and it sends back a signal of keeping that symptom going or turning it off, keeping that pain on or off. That's what happened with her. That's what happens in most cases. She simply had some repressed emotions. And within a matter of minutes, by her acknowledging those emotions, teaching her brain that they were actually safe, they weren't something threatening, they were forbidden from being expressed as a child. That's what happens. The brain can learn emotions are dangerous because as a child, you're not allowed to express certain emotions. You're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to get angry, so on and so forth. And by her teaching her brain that that emotion was actually safe, normal, and okay, her pain went from, I think it was a 9 out of 10
Yeah, it was
to,
at least an 8. I can't
yeah, to
remember.
a two,
Yeah.
and has never come back. So, and that's remarkable. Sometimes if it does come back, it simply means the neurocircuit, the neuroplasticity, the brain, the fire alarm that's stuck on needs a little bit more training to basically turn off. So, but yeah, we'll have count on all kinds of fantastic transformations for anyone that wants to come to this event and get right down to it. I'll be using all tools from regressions, the deepest pocket of things we have in order to help the people in the audience leave on a path to healing.
So, yes, thanks for joining us today. We're going to continue this conversation in next week's podcast. But I highly suggest you guys check out the link for more information about the October event, because if you do experience, pain that you just can't get answers for, attending this event may be well worth your time and your investment.
Right. It will. Here's the thing. It will be well with
Yeah.
your time and investment if you have symptoms that have stuck around for more than 3 months. That's the body's natural healing phase. If you have symptoms that have been around for longer than 3 months, you're going to have some powerful answers for what's going on, why they're there, why they've stuck around, and real answers for what you can do to actually uh, get reverse it, actually cure these things permanently. Okay. Yes, so we will continue going through this psychosomatic pain disorder, how the brain can actually learn to keep symptoms on. We'll talk about childhood trauma more. We'll talk about these things and just really give people real answers because I will say this. This is something I just read, earlier today. We've invested $80 billion a year in pain, okay, and resolving pain with everything from acupuncture to chiropractic methods to injections to narcotics, and the results are very dismal. The results are not good at all. So I will say this, the most cutting edge neuroscience that's coming out there today is indicating these kind of things I'm talking about as the root cause of chronic symptoms. And the good news is you can simply unlearn them, but you have to know how to do it correctly. Otherwise, you're going to end up just kind of going in a circle. And we want you to have the right tools, the right understanding, the right knowledge to apply it correctly to have the breakthroughs that you're wanting.